Hi everyone, I'm Geeta and welcome to another episode of the Gripdough ND podcast where we celebrate Neurodiversity Month by sharing stories, strategies, and voices that inspire inclusion and confidence in every child. Today I'm joined by Bethany Woollatt, a passionate disability and inclusion specialist, a strong advocate for neurodivergent families, and one of my closest friends. After a successful career in marketing and communications, Bethany was inspired by her differently wired child to step into the world of disability advocacy. She brings over a decade of lived experience, a master's in disability and inclusion, and a deep commitment to helping families feel supported and understood. Bethany focuses on improving participation using evidence based, family centric approaches and celebrating strengths. For more than 3 years, she has been running a strength based support group for moms and their families in Singapore. Hi, Bethany. I'm so excited to have you with us today. Welcome to Gripdough ND. Can you share your journey as a mom of a child with special needs? How has financial decision making looked like for you, for your family?
Hi, Geetha. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm thrilled to be here with the Gripdough team. Gosh, what an interesting question. I think financial decision making underpins a lot of what we do as a family certainly in our family, because I think first of all, having a child and raising any family is hard, especially in the world at the moment. But there's a lot of extra layers that until you have this lived experience, people really aren't unaware of just all the extra layers, extra costs, extra things that you need to support your child. And in a way, it's just a different version of how we imagined life, I think. So it's not better, not worse, just different.
Yes.
But from that difference comes, a need to understand what adaptations are, what modifications are, what supports look like. Are they people? Are they things? Are they places? Are they tools? So life just looks a bit different. And so I think the financial decision making we've had to make has been to make sure that we prioritize having enough supports to give our child what they need.
True.
And also for us as a family to make sure that we are having the life that we want. Well, the version of the life, that we're living now is one that makes us all happy and that we're thriving.
And ultimately we learn to prioritize what is now, what is for the future, can we live with this much? So it's a lot of decision making even in our everyday life. So, but then when you think about money or savings or planning for the future, I know we all start with this rosy outlook. For me, it has changed quite a bit how I think about money, especially considering the future of our retirement or post us for our kids. Have you thought about the future like that?
When I think about the future, I feel like there's a certain mentality when you go through those early years of understanding that life is going to look different to perhaps how you imagined. And I think it's very easy for parents to fall into the trap of, oh, don't worry about me, just worry about my child. And so we're only ever trying to do the best that we can, that with what we've got, with what we know at the time. And I think it's just very easy to forget about ourselves. So I think it's really important that we actually allow ourselves the time and the space to think about our future as parents, and then the future of the family and the future of the child as well. There's a lot of competing priorities in the early years. We're heading towards puberty. There's still, they never really go away. They just change. But I think it is really important that we allow ourselves that time. It's not selfish. In fact, it's quite important that we kind of have one hand on now and one hand on the future, because I think it's very easy to get stuck in the way things are now.
True. And it's more important to be mindful of the present so we can build a solid future. We forget to realize that this is what makes the future. I have realized that parenting an ND child shifts our perspective a lot, not just emotionally, but also very practically, like the way we think about money or the way we think about preparing them for life. So that is why I'm very passionate about bringing financial literacy, because that is one gap that I hope to, or as a company, Gripdough ND hopes to fill in. And I feel like that's an area that's very crucial for independence and confidence, or like you say, whatever a successful life looks like for the child, right? So, what do you think? Do you think like financial literacy is important, especially for our neurodiverse kids?
Look, I think financial literacy is important for everyone in that sense, but especially for our kids, of course. As I was sort of saying before, I think, when life looks differently than how you imagined, then you need to take the time to rethink lots of things. And I think the one thing I'd like to just make a point of is that I think it's one thing to talk about neurodivergent kids as a group, but I think it's also worth acknowledging that everyone's family is going to look different. Every child presents differently. Like there's a saying, if you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. And so I think whilst thinking about why and how it's important to neurodivergent children, I think it's worth understanding that what those issues are, what those needs are, and what that importance is will look different for every family. And I think it's also really important that we don't, that we're conscious of using stereotypes, because it's very easy to make assumptions, for example, that all autistic people love numbers and things like that. When not true. When it's definitely not true. And while some neurodivergent people love numbers, and maths concepts they are actually quite hard for plenty of others. And I think it's worth pointing out that under the neurodivergence banner is a lot more than autism, and a lot of people who tick those boxes for neurodivergence also present with multiple other diagnoses. So nobody's profiles and nobody's challenges and nobody's type of support is ever going to look the same. That said, in our instance, I have two kids, one who is definitely neurodivergent, one who has perhaps got a question mark over their head, and one loves numbers and one does not. And I've had to really adjust my thinking and learning around how this different brain understands numbers. And one of our therapists helped me to understand that, for example, if you were to say, what's 15 plus 3? For my daughter, 15 is just a number floating around in space. We need to find a way to help her to actually locate where 15 is on the number line before we can add the 3 to it. Because she's such a visual learner, and so numbers and concepts like money can actually be really abstract for these brains who perceive the world differently, and for those that struggle with numbers. So for us, definitely it's a journey of patience, and I think there's a lot of checking in on ourselves as parents. Instead of going, why can't you just do this, but actually going, okay, how can we do this? What do we need to do this? And so to build her financial literacy, we need to look at what are the right tools at the right stage of her learning and how to support her. And I think also it's very easy to think that there'll be one tool that will work all the time.
Doesn't.
But no. So it's about understanding that, like all children, our children are going to keep on growing and developing and changing. And so we need to make sure that the way we support them and help them to grow their skills changes as well. I, at home, use Just Dance because Chris dances a lot. So we find a lot of money-related songs. So while he's dancing, I hope he learns something. Do you have any strategies or tips so that whoever is listening, maybe they can try it out? Absolutely. And I think what's worth mentioning is a lot of the things you can try actually have multiple great outcomes. So, for example, for us, one of the things that we started doing when my daughter was younger was every Tuesday we would go to the corner shop and buy one thing. And so, we just practiced and everything about having to wait in lines, having to, speak to people and having patience to find the one thing that you wanted. I mean, often we went and bought a packet of stickers, the same, but the whole point was getting her used to going out and standing in line, handing the money over, getting the change, and just understanding that transaction and the social interactions around it and how to be able to participate in the community and build those skills around going to the shops as well. So, and it also became a bit of a social activity. We also do some chores around the house, fairly simple and no pressure. And I think what's working well for that is you understand that value around earning money, and it becomes your money, and then you can save it up for a while. But I also think something that we're really mindful of as well is also spending some of it. So it's also about enjoying your hard work and being able to do nice things for yourself, and but often to do those nice things for yourself there may be a cost, and so then it's weighing up, is this cost worth what I want to do? And generally it always is. My daughter tends to want to save up her money to buy things like a game for her Nintendo or something. So for her, she's in for the long game usually.
That's already very financially prudent.
Yeah. But it's I just think it's also worthwhile, mentioning there's a lot of negotiation and problem solving and planning and all these executive functioning skills that come alongside from this financial activity. And the other thing that we've started doing recently is looking at buying things online, because you can see the prices, you can compare prices, and even doing things like trying to book a taxi, and you can compare the prices, but also then learning those life skills and independent skills about getting yourself out and about in the community and the independence. So there's a lot of really great, more holistic kind of skills that can come about, which are rooted in these financial activities. The other thing that I think I'd really like to say is it could be very easy to think, oh, my child couldn't go to the shops or do that. You know what? My advice there is, don't ask yourself, can they do it? Ask, how can they do it?
How can I support?
Exactly. And suddenly that changes the way you can support your child to start those activities. And sometimes just starting is enough.
Exactly.
And start small. Small steps soon become bigger steps, and suddenly you're further along than you realize.
And I think every parent that I've spoken to, they come up with, start with baby steps, start small. And it's so wonderful that you're building this agency, the independence and the decision making, which is a very big executive functioning skill, which even like a lot of adults lack. So I think when you make it a conversation, a negotiation, you're already giving them a very solid foundation, and it's wonderful you're doing that. So now, as you imagine your child growing up, of course, you're building the independence when it comes to the financial aspects. But again, as a parent, we walk a very thin line of balancing this desire for our child to be financially independent, but at the same time, we want to sort of protect them and keep them under our supervision. And how do you balance that thin line of having to protect our child and giving them the financial independence when it comes to that?
I think I'm going to sound like a broken record a bit here, Geetha, but I feel like these philosophies are really important for people to adopt and see how they can be applied across a broad spectrum of activities, because really I think it comes down to starting everything in small steps. And if something's overwhelming or if it's not working, break it down smaller, and then move at a pace that works for you and your family and your child. And we might be surprised,
That's true.
And so I think that, and part of moving those small steps, what we're essentially doing is scaffolding our children, which means that we're giving them the support to build the skills and understanding and awareness of what to do. And that's really important, because I think without going slowly, without going small, it will become overwhelming. And then things feel more impossible when actually what we want is the opposite. And sometimes it's, power in the word yet. It's not no that my child can't do this. It's not yet. And when we go slowly, then we build them up, and we do it in a way that they feel confident and they feel like they can do it. And then, to me, that is the perfect way of balancing that safety is through empowerment. Because when our fear holds our children back, I feel like as a parent, that's the last thing I want to do.
That's true.
And sometimes it can even be subconscious, because we don't even realize that we're feeling worried or afraid about our children. But in many ways, they're a child the same as any other child and deserve the same opportunities, but in a way they can access it. So how can we, back to that question again, how can we scaffold them in a way that works for them to develop the same skills as everyone else? And they really might surprise you. My experience has always been, every time I've given an opportunity to my daughter, she's always stepped up every single time. And I often find myself thinking, oh gosh, why didn't I try this sooner? Yes. And the other thing I think as parents, we feel this huge sense of responsibility to protect our children, when actually what they need is that choice, that autonomy. And it doesn't, choice and autonomy, they don't have to be big things. Delegating some of the control to our children doesn't have to be big. We start small, and then we see it's through giving our children choice and control over decisions that we again empower them. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is, if in trying to scaffold our children to develop those skills, if we talk to them about how they're feeling about and what they want and what they want to try, then getting their buy-in is a really significant part of them getting invested in their own sort of development and their own skills. And once again, they might actually surprise you. They might just be waiting for you to open the door for them to try.
Yes, what you said is so true, because most of the fear, I think, is just inside our heads. When our children are developmentally ready, we keep supporting them. And when they're ready, they really step up. They really enjoy this freedom, this having agency over their own personal money or independence or whatever it is. I always tell parents, we have to try. We have to keep trying. And at some point when the child is ready, they'll surprise you. They'll catch up and they'll probably surpass you. You never know. And since your master's, congratulations, is in disability and inclusion, which we talk about a lot, our children need this thriving community that supports them. We as parents can't go at it alone. So that's why we need the community support. We need the school support, the educators, the therapists, the doctors. What are schools or educators missing when it comes to preparing ND kids for financially independent? Or do you have any suggestions for the community as a whole?
I do also just want to make a comment on something you just said then. I think you've just hit the nail on the head beautifully, which is that lovely reminder that it really does take a village to raise our kids.
Yes.
And I think for some, especially those early out, it can also feel like a really isolating experience. But there are actually amazing networks around for us to tap into. And I think it's so important to find the right networks, be they formal therapists or informal, through family or through schools, whatever, lean into those networks. And so to your point then about schools or educators, I think it also depends on which school or educators, because no two are alike, I think, like our kids. And I mean, I remember programs when I was a child, where the banks came into the schools and they actually talked about setting up a savings account and making regular deposits. And so people from the bank came into our schools and actually talked to you about why this was important. And and that's how I got my first bank account.
Exactly.
And
in India, it was a post office savings account. Like, they came to our school and then they got us to, and then we used to get these tiny passbooks which we can update and see how much we have. And that was my first account. Yes.
Yeah. And so I can understand why schools may not want to align with a specific financial institution. But I still think it would be good if they would have this conversation, and really, because I think that's something that is perhaps missing for our kids. And I also think, there can be so much focus on teaching our kids social skills and to all get along and to all be really, nice to each other no matter what. But I also think that can make our kids vulnerable to things like scams or those who may look to take advantage of them. So I personally focus on teaching my kids what good social interactions look like and when to walk away or when to ask for help. So for example, if someone is confusing you, walk away or ask for help. If someone is not listening to you, walk away or ask for help.
Yes.
If someone's asking you for something you're not sure about, walk away or ask for help. If someone's making threats or making you feel uncomfortable in any way, walk away or ask for help. Your real friends won't do any of those things to you. And I think it's always, I really want to teach my kids this, to choose safety over kindness. So I tell them, they don't need to be nice to someone who makes you feel unsafe in any way. And I think that extends to people who are trying to manipulate them. And so I think, what I would like to see in schools is a focus on what good social interactions look like, not just building social skills generally, because I think there's a gap there as far as I can see.
True. And the one you said about scams, the walk away or ask for help, that is such golden treasure. I'm definitely making a poster out of it, because I feel like scams are the biggest threat at the moment, especially when the whole world has gone digital. But there's not enough support for any child, and there is no conversation on it yet, when that is the biggest threat. So you are amazing. I'm definitely taking that for my poster content.
Fantastic. But also, it connects back to the point we were talking about before, which is choice and control.
True.
When we empower our kids to know that they have a choice, if someone's on the phone trying to manipulate them and they've got this feeling in their stomach that, I don't think this is right, but I have to be polite, I have to practice my good social skills, and I can't. We need to empower them through, so they feel like they have a choice to say no to that person.
Exactly.
I feel like there's only so far we can scam proof anybody, because they're getting more and more sophisticated.
Yeah.
But, at a base level, I think that would be a really good place to start.
It's a brilliant suggestion, and I'm definitely adding it to one of my resources. So the financial literacy, like you said, is, one part is helping our children thrive, but inclusion in daily life goes beyond money. It's about designing experiences, spaces, and tools that accommodate every child's needs. And I know that your thesis focuses on inclusion and participation in the digital world. And I absolutely am amazed by your research. But if Gripdough were to develop a financial literacy app, what are some inclusive design features would you suggest for us? I mean, it's still work in progress, but it's good to get tips from the expert.
You're too kind. Look, what I learned from my studies is more like the principles that make for good design. And what I learned from my research is that for an app to be valuable to families with children with disabilities and neurodivergence, there are three key things. It needs to be usable, useful, and person-centered. And I'm going to start I'll unpack that a little bit, but I'm going to start by talking about what does it mean to be person-centered. And specifically in this instance, what I learned was a really good tool to support our kids looks at what they need now, but also then looks at what they need in the future, because what can happen is the tools can become redundant if they just make an assumption that there's no growth in the individual. So how can they, like, perhaps there's different levels to a game or something, or the opportunities to develop skills. Perhaps there's a way to have activities that, for example, need help, but then you can go on to do them independently. So that's looking at now and the future. You can see there's that opportunity for that growth. And also, presumes competence and presumes that that growth is going to happen in a really great way.
Yeah.
And so for an app to be, or any kind of digital tool to be useful, it needs to be easy to use and also desirable. And so being easy to use, what came out of my research was it needed to be quite visual with simple steps.
Yes.
And, something that the kids like and makes sense to use. So, and desirable, kind of crosses into that as well. But desirable kind of comes down to making sure that whatever the app is for is desirable. It's not patronizing, it's respectful, and is something that the kids are going to want to use.
Of course.
The families want to use. The other thing was usable, and what came out of my research was for a tool to be usable, it needs to be flexible and accessible. What does flexible mean? It means being able to adapt to different users and not require a certain profile to use the app. So again, it presumes competence and presumes that growth, but it doesn't say you need to have a certain level of ability to read or anything like that. So you can see how these pieces kind of all fit together. And the other thing is that it meets web content accessibility design criteria. So, and that's something I think not everyone's familiar with, but there is accessibility criteria to be for online tools and platforms and websites to meet the needs of all kinds of disabilities. And
so those are like standards.
Correct. Yeah. And it is literally called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Okay.
And there's different versions, and they're really a great way to make sure that everyone can access the tool. And I think what's really important is at the heart of all of this was what came out of my study was the relationship with the environment. And what that means is focusing on how to connect the child to their environment. Once again, asking how can they do it, not can they do it. In the sense that we don't ask a person with a wheelchair if they can walk at some point, or if a vision impaired person will give up their glasses at some point. We look at what they need to be able to participate, to be involved, get out, to complete the thing they want to do. And when we look at environment, that's actually connected to the social model of disability, which looks at the relationship between the individual and their environment, as opposed to the medical model, which says the impairments are all with the person and we must fix the person. So when we start to look at what is needed to access the environment, and in this instance, I don't necessarily mean walking out your front door. I mean to access the thing that you want to do in the community. And so suddenly that becomes a very different conversation. And it doesn't ask people to be anything they're not. It is that acceptance, that belonging, that inclusion, that just as you are, you can have this experience too.
So those are amazing suggestions. Actually, I want to do a separate podcast just on your research. It's so interesting, and those were like nuggets of knowledge, and I had no idea we had those standards, which is good to have. Like when you're developing something for a community, it's good to have certain standards set so that everybody can follow that and make it really usable and user friendly. Let me turn the table on you. If you could design, I know you're an amazing app designer. I know one of the apps that you were working on. So if you were at this point in time, if you were to design a simple tool or a game to help ND kids learn about money, what would it be? Keep it very simple.
I was thinking about this a little bit, and honestly, I don't think I could come up with something that doesn't exist already. But because I think, there's lots of great games out there. I personally like the games that are like simulations, I think, which are really great because they're kind of like that role playing where you can go out and you can buy something. And I know that my daughter would happily spend ages, playing with something like that to learn. There's a great game that she loves where people come into the pizza shop and you've got to make the pizza, and then you cook the pizza, and you've got to remember the order and count out how many things to go on top, and then you have to take the money at the end and everything. And so I feel like anything that was simulation based, I think would be really great because that's a lot of the simulations are quite visual, which I think would tick a lot of boxes, and can have a lot of prompts built in and different levels of difficulty. And I think that the practice is just so important for our kids to have those chances rather than simply doing a maths or financial game.
And that would be the most boring thing. But this simulation sort of adds in a lot of value in the sense it gives them a scenario, it gives them real life situations possibly. And that would be like a brilliant way to incorporate a lot of these things, but on the game. So lastly, what's your vision for your child's financial future? And more importantly, what message would you give other parents who are just starting this journey? And truthfully, right now we have an amazing amount of information, but for a parent who is just beginning to wonder, how do I teach my child money or anything? In fact, it can get a bit overwhelming. And though we need the right support, community takes a while to come into that. So what message would you give to them if they're just starting on this journey?
So I'll answer your question about the vision first and then the message second.
Sure.
So I think my vision for my daughter will look different to everyone else's because just to remind everyone again, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person, and every family is on their own journey. So our focus for her is to be able to manage her own money with support. And I think, in the short-term future, that will definitely look like using a card and not cash, but never say never in the long term. And, teaching her about digital transactions, I think. Our other focus is for her in the long term to have a place of her own to live with stability so she doesn't have to worry about moving around or anything like that.
That's true.
And I think thinking about the future for other families can be really overwhelming when you have no idea what the future is going to look like for your child. When you're starting out, there's just so many unknowns and no one can give you an answer at that point. And so it can be overwhelming to think about the future when you're worried about what's going on for your child right now. And I think it's worth acknowledging the great job these parents are doing where they're at right now.
That's true.
So I think what I'd say to parents is that it's never too late to start thinking about the future, but it's also got to be when you're ready. And it's okay to start small because small steps add up, as we've discussed.
Yes.
And also what works for one family may not work for another. So don't worry about what others are doing. Find something that works for you, for your family and your child. What I would say in particular is just thinking about it is a start. Planning is a step.
Yes.
And more tangible actions can then follow. So perhaps it's about just starting with a bank account or a plan to start visiting the shops or doing simple chores. Perhaps it's researching what's involved in setting up a trust or working towards a savings for a place in assisted living facility or independent living. Don't be afraid to just start thinking about it in the early years. Then it's okay. You don't need to have all the answers right now.
Yes.
I think that's really my message because, I can remember those early years and I just had no idea how things would look. And the way my daughter is presenting now is so different to 10 years ago. And so I could not have imagined what the future would look like. And I think in another 10 years from now, it might look completely different again.
Yes.
I just want to say, just take the pressure off yourself for having to have the right answer, but start small, start by thinking, start with a plan. And, plans can change.
Yes. And that's the beauty of making plans. You can change them anytime. And it's such a wonderful, hope-filled message that honestly, I wish someone had given me 10 years ago when I was going through all these things. And it's so important to put out this hope into that is why I would really wanted this podcast with you, because you are someone who always has this brightness and you exude hope, and we all are moons just reflecting your optimism. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your advice and message not only will help parents navigate around money topics while planning for their kids or for themselves, but they also inspire us to think about inclusion in every part of child's life, not just money, in almost every part of it, from learning to play to the digital apps that they might be using and interactions in society, like your corner shop example. So we're so grateful for your time and wisdom. Thank you so much, Bethany.
Thank you, Geetha. I've loved being here today. Always a pleasure talking with you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Bethany. That was such an inspiring conversation. You've given us a lot to think about, especially that reminder to start small, scaffold our child's progress, and shift our question from can my child do this to how can I help my child do this? Every family is different, every child is different. And as Bethany beautifully said, it's all about beginning where you are with what you have whenever you can. At Gripdough ND, we hope to be that gentle stepping stone, a space where families and educators can find ideas, tools, and resources to make learning about money accessible for every child. And coming up later this week, we'll be releasing a blog on dyscalculia research because, as our previous guest shared, understanding how kids experience numbers is key to making financial literacy truly inclusive. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, small steps build big confidence.